Hopefully everybody can see that. This workshop is the resilience session, and my name is Duncan Gordon, and I'm the trainer for the Cyrenians Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution. So the Cyrenians in Edinburgh mainly works and operates out of Edinburgh and the region, the East Lothian region, but they do have a couple of national projects, of which I am one. So the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution provides events and training for staff that work with families with young people, parents and carers, and young people. So we deliver events and training related to family conflict resolution. So we're funded as an early intervention initiative by the Scottish Government. And our last survey that we did in terms of why we do what we do, it highlighted that 68% of young people would like more support to address conflict at home from outside their family or friends. And 84% of parents and carers said they would like more support to come from outside the family. And when it comes to practitioners, an interesting stat that I grabbed was that 38% of practitioners felt that they did not have the necessary knowledge and skills to address conflict with families they work with, even though they recognise they deal with conflict on a daily basis. So thinking about the health and well-being, which feeds into resilience, how do you think that feeds into their emotional health and well-being? So just to reassure that workers who work in this field right across the UK, they do have the skills. But as for all skills, they have to be practiced and refreshed and updated. So that's the key point. But part of the training we do is to reassure workers that they are skilled, they're applying their skills, and they're doing it well. So the aim of this session, hopefully, is to underpin some of the characteristics for feeling confident and competent within your role, but more importantly, within yourself, okay? You're probably the most resilient people in the world, but you're only human. I think we need to keep remembering that. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge that and start off by asking you about your health and well-being. So working in this field is demanding and complex. Our relationships can be demanding and complex. Our environment can be demanding and complex. And in a nutshell, our lives can be demanding and complex. And those—
Hi, Duncan.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to interrupt. Apologies for interrupting quickly. Would you be able to make the PowerPoint slide full screen and take the notes off the screen?
All right. Okay. Sorry. Is that better?
There, lovely. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so sorry about that. So Tom, could you launch the poll for me? Okay, so this is anonymous. So it'd be useful just to see how people are feeling today at this time. No, I can't see any of the results. There we go. All right, so you can see the fact is that 66% of the audience is managing, 7% feel that they are resilient at this time. 21% are coping, and 7% are not so good. Okay. So, as it highlights in the heart, the goal of resilience is to thrive. So, arguably, to be resilient, we need to maintain our health and well-being. And for those who are feeling resilient and managing, ensure it's not at the cost of your health and well-being. For example, burnout. And for those who are struggling, be reassured that people care. Be kind to yourself. You are very important. Okay, take a step back, slow things down. Normally, when we're feeling like this, we're feeling stressed, everything is going at 100 miles an hour. First thing we need to do is tell ourselves to stop, relax, and reflect on what's actually causing the stress. Okay, these external stressors, and then approach it differently. Okay, so the idea is that identifying what you can control, what you can't control, and then picking out the bits that you can actually then deal with. Okay, so in terms of some of the statistics, when I looked at the annual report, Frontline Worker Survey 2022, as you can see there, most frontline workers feel that their job negatively affects their well-being. Uncertainty about continuing to work in the sector, and the reasons cited for that, the impact of the role on their mental health and well-being. So employee burnout is on the rise and stress levels are increasing. Research by Deloitte suggests, and this was their 21-22 research, that 28% of employees have either left their jobs in 2021 or are planning to leave their jobs in 2022. So 61% citing poor mental health as the reason that they're leaving. So a resilient person works through challenges by using personal resources and strengths and other positive capacities, like your psychological capital, for example, optimism and self-efficacy. But that gets worn away as we continue with the work, the frontline work that we do. And how we interpret our physical and emotional reaction in situations of stress and tension affects how we judge fatigue and our vulnerability to stress. Simply put, it's just basically how we perceive obstacles has an impact on how we deal with them. Okay. So again, it's just about making sure that you're in an emotionally healthy state to manage emotions and deal with difficult scenarios. So resilience itself then. Resilience, what is it? Okay, resilience, the Mayo Clinic would describe it as resilience means being able to adapt to life's misfortunes and setbacks. Now, most people would describe it as the ability to bounce back from adversity. So take that term, bouncing back. It's quite an interesting term in itself. You know, does it infer that you're likely to be knocked down every time you face adversity? Or is it that adversity itself has to be that traumatic that it knocks you down and that you need to get back up and carry on? Well, we understand now that diversity doesn't have to be that traumatic. It can be any difficult or unpleasant situation that affects your health and well-being. So whatever or however you want to describe resilience, it is a strength. Okay, it's a strength we need within us to recognize when to bounce back, either by ourselves or with the help of others. And that allows us to develop as a person and grow as an individual. So, carrying on with resilience then. So as it says there, I've suggested it's bouncing back, but how do people define or identify their resilience, the strength within us? And how would you describe it? For some people, they don't recognize it. So I'm going to ask you, how do you identify your resilience? How do you identify your inner strength? Now, rather than doing the Menti situation, I'm just going to ask you to pop it into chat. How would you describe your inner strength? Okay. Knowing how to take care of myself. Yeah. So again, interesting. How do you do that? Ability to hold myself with enough kind attention that I can notice my needs even as I help others. Being grounded. Okay. Self-confidence and courage. Courage is a great word. I mean, developing self-confidence can be difficult. Now, again, these are great. They're coming in thick and fast. So for those who are struggling a bit, or for people in general, just to have a look at what's coming in, and see if there's anything that would inspire you. So again, there's a couple there in terms of awareness of my mental health triggers and how to manage them. Very important that we understand triggers, okay, especially emotional triggers. Admitting you're human, as to what, that'd be quite interesting. Being able to remain positive after a challenging situation, yes. And again, when we talk about how we develop our emotions and our behaviors throughout life, we do have a blueprint in our early years where we develop an attachment style, which tends to provide us with a foundation of how we then develop our resilience and confidence and our connection with people. So for some, it can be quite easy. For others, it can be quite a challenge to build confidence, to connect with people. Reminding myself that I'm not responsible for fixing everything. Okay, and that is a good one. You know, we're not in a position to fix people. Okay, we're in a position to support people. And what we should be aiming to do is to empower people to manage their situation, okay, with our help, with our support. And the reason I say that is because you'll not be there for them all the time. So they need to then develop these skills for themselves. And this is where you play a really important part in the lives of others. But to do that, you have to maintain your own emotional health and well-being. Knowing my limitations, and that's quite a useful one in terms of does that link in with boundaries of my role, or does it link in with understanding just emotionally, how much can I take? And when do I need to take breaks? Mental power, okay, superpower. Okay, that's fantastic. There's some great things there. Controlling the controllables and being grateful. And it's something that's, sometimes we're too busy to think about things that we're grateful for. And it's quite useful just to reflect on that, not feeling worn down by circumstances. And I have to remember not to put my clients, not to own my clients' problems. Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you very much for that. So some of the things that I've been reading in relation to examples might include the belief in yourself, okay? Identifying what you have to get through this. So it may be a case that you have resources that you can use to manage your emotions. I'm thinking about family, I'm thinking about friends, I'm thinking about colleagues. Living your values, so again, having a good moral compass can help this. Identifying that if things don't go right, it's not necessarily a failure, but a learning experience. So again, life is about learning. So everything we experience, we should learn from. And sometimes recognizing you don't have control over the outcome and accepting that and acknowledging that. Emotionally strong, all right, so understanding what makes you comfortable and what makes you uncomfortable. And again, think about some people might have their faith that gets them through, or previous experience where you've managed it before and you're able to carry on with that. Okay. The question coming in terms of, do you have any advice about how to advocate for self when protecting my resilience means confronting authority? How to raise these issues before crisis point? It's a common one, to be honest with you. And again, I think it starts off with a conversation. And the reality is, when we talk about managing relationships in conflict, the approaches are very important. So the idea is that we don't try to go into these scenarios as a combatant. So we don't want a win-lose scenario. We want a win-win scenario. So the idea is that we try to think about how can we get the authority or the management to understand where I'm coming from. So we talk about positions and interests. So with that in mind, you need to think about what is it I want and what is it I need? And then anticipate what the management want and what the management need or the authority needs. And then as we approach it, we start talking about it, trying to find a common ground that you can discuss things with. So the idea is that we acknowledge that it's going to be difficult. We identify our needs. Our needs are not being met, and why they're not being met, and that would provide you with the interests. And the collaborative approach of what sort of options you might have to progress this. but it very much depends on your own organizational structures and communication routes. And again, the reality is that management potentially might understand, but feel that they don't have the capability to resolve it. So they continue and don't resolve it, so they avoid that conflict. So the idea is making sure that we approach this in a way that it allows a voice being heard on both sides of the table. Hopefully that answers some of that question. And some people may be very resilient in the workplace, but not as resilient in their personal life or personal relationships, or vice versa, as we just highlighted there. So the idea of resilience is relative, depends on the situation, and depends on the situation. Okay, so I think somebody had highlighted it varies depending on the situation in the chat, and it does. So as things change, we change to accommodate that, and we learn new skills. We build more confidence, or our confidence gets eroded with the adversity. So things changing all the time. And again, depending on your interactions and the environment around you will depend on how you respond to that. Take the current situation in terms of the impact of the economic situation on people's lives at the moment. But building resilience, when we talk about building resilience, it starts with you. And some people tend to shy away from being self-aware, being more comfortable with being self-critical or self-deprecating. However, knowing ourselves well, what motivates us, our boundaries, our mental and physical well-being allows us to function in a way that builds positivity, confidence, and competence, which helps build resilience. So we're talking about the foundations on what we can build on. Starts with us, okay? So taking a realistic look at ourselves, identifying our strengths, and identifying some of the shortfalls and the gaps that we might have, and how we can address those. Being present, how do we stay present? So again, I suppose the first thing we need to recognize is that, try as we might, we really only can do one thing at a time. So for those who suggest that they multitask, you don't, okay? You do one thing at a time. The brain will only deal with one thing at a time. Most of our time, however, is spent in the past or in the future, rather than the present moment. Try to make every day meaningful. It can provide a sense of purpose and accomplishment, which then feeds into that positivity, confidence, and competence. Being present also allows you to understand other people, how they perceive you, your attitude, your responses to them in that moment. So again, if you're distracted, if you're not at your best, then that might come through at the time. And understanding emotions. So we've talked about triggers. So being able to manage our emotions when facing difficult or challenging situations, which again, just to remind you, you do, and some people do on a daily basis. To maintain our mental health and emotional well-being through understanding our emotions. And we need to understand our triggers and how our emotional states are created. What you've got to realize about triggers is the fact is that when we have a trigger, that is the time we need to apply the strategy for managing our emotion. Not when we're at the stage of releasing that emotion or that escalation of that emotion, but at the trigger point. It's another indicator that if you understand your triggers, then that would be a time to tell yourself to stop, take a step back, and think about how that is going to progress. When we're talking about conflict scenarios, we talk about we don't talk about the conflict in front of people, okay, because it's not about that. We talk about the person, all right, about you, realizing the next step you take will either escalate a situation or de-escalate a situation. What do you want to do? So by just thinking that through allows you to potentially approach difficult situations more thoughtfully. Now, again, I suppose a plug for the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution's website. On our website, we have psychoeducational resources, and they're fun resources. So they're based on quizzes and information. So we have 4, but they all deal with emotions. So we have monkey v. lizard. So are you a monkey brain or a lizard brain when you deal with conflict? It doesn't define you, but it gives you an indicator what you tend to gravitate towards, either an emotional or a reactive thinker. And then we have Keep the Heat, which is that sort of Scottish twang to it, but it's about Dan Siegel's Flipping Your Lid, based on the Circus of Life. So again, another quiz. You go on and you come out with an answer, a circus character and a narrative, and it allows you to start talking about anger and what that emotion means to you, and realizing that we all flip our lids differently. So it allows you to then have that conversation. We then have the Cranial Cocktail, and that's an information resource, fantastic resource. It introduces us to 5 key emotional states and 8 neurochemicals, our brain's amazing drugs cabinet, and which neurochemicals create your emotional states. And it allows you to interact with each state and that cranial cocktail mix. And that resource in particular, anecdotally we found out that is being used all over the world in different scenarios. So these are resources for workers to use to support people. And the last one is 3 Brains, couched in music in a band. We talk about our actual brain, our heart, and our gut, and the neural conversations they have between them. Realizing that if we keep these 3 brains in tune, then likelihood is that in a band context or music context, we'd be making good records. In a human context means that we'd be functioning well, okay? And this opens up other areas that you can discuss with the people you support about diet, about exercise, about mental health. So these are all resources that are online. You can use them, interact with them online, or you can download them as hard copies. They're free, okay? It's a resource. And tell whoever you support it's a resource for them as well, okay? They may not use it, but they know it's there when they want to. Okay. Okay, thanks for putting that link in, Tom. Okay, so moving on then, there are a number of models that for resilience. I've just picked this one out because I found it easier, and it also comes with a nice little video that puts it simplistically rather than going through the details of it. But when we talk about resilience, we talk about, and this is about workplace resilience, we talk about energy, okay? About sustaining and renewing physical energy. How do we do that? And it's an interesting one because I've just gone through a sugar-free month, which I'm just coming to the end of. It's been tough, okay, to be honest with you. My realization was that I was eating far too much sugar, far too many sweets, keep my energy levels up. The impact of that, I wasn't sleeping very well. So I decided to do a month to see if I could do it. One, to see if I had the willpower, and two, to see what impact it would have on me. So far, okay, just to give you some of my results. Feeling tired, more fatigued, okay, so my body hasn't really acclimatized. So I can, you know, I do continue exercise, I'm able to exercise, and when I do exercise, I recharge my energy. But what I found is, I'm not a great sleeper, but when I do sleep now, I actually sleep. I have a peaceful sleep, a deep sleep, whereas before I was very irritable, move about, and never felt that I had a great sleep. So again, it's just about, where do we get that energy from? How do we get that energy from? Future focus. So again, it's easier to feel resilient when you have a sense of purpose and direction. So this is taken from the wellbeing side. But again, it's just about seeing what's in front of you. You can imagine, you think about it, I'm just thinking about it now. You have a holiday booked. I can guarantee you that that's something you look forward to. Your future focus is getting on that holiday and having a rest or a break. So that's just a nice, easy example of how that could provide you with that feeling that there's something good ahead, okay? And remember, when we talk about our emotional states, and we talk about a cranial cocktail, if you change a mindset, you change the composition of the chemicals that are going around you. And if you can change that, then you can change a mood, you can change an emotion, all right? That's how powerful that is. As an example, if you think about, I mean, again, talk about music, think about your favorite record. It takes you right back to when you heard it. You know, you can remember when you heard it and why you liked it so much. That's how powerful that psychological process is. So the idea is about changing a mindset can actually change your mood from there. So keeping it positive. We have inner drive. So sometimes, you know, even when we're clear about what we want, we might not believe we can get there. So the inner drive is about self-belief, confidence, and motivation. Going back to when you think about what creates that resilience, we've got things like self-belief, confidence, and motivation. So that inner drive, that inner strength. Flexible thinking. So again, when we are in problem mode, we tend to think things very black and white, okay, and can't get a sense of what the options are. And we can get stuck in that. So flexible thinking helps us think outside the box. I don't particularly like using these sort of buzz terms, but it gives you an idea of, in terms of new ideas and possibilities. So the idea, flexible thinking, And again, I would put that as thinking about it in the context of emotions again. It's about stop. Tell yourself to stop. Slow things down in your brain. Take a breath, relax, and then start thinking again. Breathe, okay? Get some oxygen back into your body, back into your brain. Get the thinking brain working, and then come back into it. So I would couch flexible thinking in that sense, for me anyway. And then we have strong relationships. So again, it is a common misperception or misconception that resilient people are fiercely independent, okay? So like they wear their underpants outside their tights, sort of stuff. The reality is quite different though. So research would suggest otherwise. Resilient people have great relationships. They feel empathy towards others, and are not too proud to share problems. You know, and that's something, again, it's a learned behavior. Sometimes, again, thinking back about, do we see our stress as a weakness and therefore we don't like to talk about our weakness? It's not a weakness, okay? It's a natural process. It's a human response to something that is happening within you. So everything your body does, okay, that triggers something in you is something based in a primal survival response. So there is nothing wrong with feeling how you're feeling. What your body is trying to tell you is either, you know, be resilient or go and get some help and support. Don't just ignore it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if I can do this, I'm going to play the video that comes with this, and hopefully you'll be able to hear and see it. Let me just start it.
Hi, Duncan.
Yeah.
There's no sound coming through.
Oh dear. All right. Okay. Let me just put that through there. Right. I'm not sure. Let me just have a look. It would help, I suppose. Okay, let me just go back to my presentation, and what I'll do is I might have forgot to, I can't seem to tick any share sound boxes from.
I mean, if it's okay, we can send it out with the resources after the presentation, if that works.
Okay, so it'll just be a link, a Vimeo link.
Okay,
probably.
sure.
Okay. Okay, right, apologies for that. as I say, it's quite a nice video using the car analogy in terms of running the car. So it goes through each one, but it provides, I like things to be simple as possible in relation to understanding. So hopefully, if you get the link, have a look at it. It's very short, but very useful. Okay, so moving on from that, we've got the barriers in. So as it says there, so this was from a paper called Burnout to Wellbeing by Nadia Mahood and David Rothenberger. They were the authors. But from Burnout to Wellbeing, I'll focus on resilience. So the 5 most common barriers to resilience. So which one of these seem most relevant to you? And again, you can have a look at that and talk about things. You imagine it's imbalance between work and personal life. You know, we get so focused on our work that we forget that we have a personal life. And that balance is not there. And similarly within even in a family situation, in any walk of life, when we get too focused on our work, we tend to have different objectives. And interesting enough, the person might be going out to work and they work 24/7, and when you ask them and they say, well, I want a good life for my family, I want them to have what I didn't have. And yet when you go back into the family home and you ask the family what they would like, and their wants or their needs would be, I would like my parent to be at the dinner table. I would like them to have quality time with me. Okay. So the reality is both those goals are going to clash and come into conflict at some time. And then you'll find that relationships start to break down. So making sure that you, once in a while, take a step back and think about, how is my work-life balance? And what are my priorities in life? And what are my shared priorities in life with my family or my partner or those that I care about? So that is very important to how you build up your resilience, is about making sure you have a balanced lifestyle. Overexposure to stressful events. Now again, in the nature of the work that some frontline workers do, this can be very common. And I say that after reading the report and some of the examples of what frontline workers have to deal with, especially in the inner cities. Overexposure to stressful events will impact on you. All right, so I'm not telling you what you don't already know. So how do you manage that? What processes have you in place? Do you have supervision? Do you have well-being meetings? Are you open in relation to disclosing that information, and how are you supported in that? And it's really interesting in terms of, we had a staff conference the other week there, and one of my workshops was an emotional homunculus. So what we get the people to create a sculpture of how they're feeling at that time, all right, in Play-Doh. And I asked them to name their sculpts. Now, the conference was upbeat, it was in person, there's a lot of laughter, a lot of banter about, and the room was good. So they had to go at this. Play-Doh exercise, all having fun. Wrote the names on post-it notes and put it on the table. And again, sometimes when you see some of the shapes and the objects, you think, what's that? So you're curious. You say, right, well, can you explain that? What does that mean to you in terms of your feelings and your emotion at this time? And they'll explain it to you. And then suddenly that object that they're holding makes sense, makes complete sense. All right. And therefore you have that understanding. So, but what struck me this time, and I don't usually do this, but as I was collecting up the names and tidying up, I noted that there was very few names that suggested people were in a happy state. Even though the room was sort of happy and jovial and banter and everything else, the reality was underneath that exterior, people were feeling stressed, people were feeling pain, people were feeling disconnected. And that really struck me. So I actually took all the names, came back and actually looked at them and did a little bit analysing and realised that only 30% of that group had put happy names to their or suggested that they were happy and content at that time. 30%. So 70% were not really in a good place. And I mentioned this to my line manager, and he suggested that, well, I should tell the CEO, which I did. Okay, I told him what happened. And even though I said, well, there's nothing to be really concerned about, but it does show you that it's not happiness that's driving people in the workplace, it's resilience. Okay. But is it something that the organization needs to consider? Because our organization has support mechanisms, has places where you can go, are supportive to each other. But is it actually getting to the core of the issue? So, given his due, the CEO said, yeah, right, okay, that was really interesting. I'm going to take that back to the leadership team and see how that is going to, how we view that and if there's anything we can do about that. So again, it's something that, don't be afraid to speak out in that respect. We're all working for the same goal, same objective, and we should be supporting each other, irrespective of what level we work at. Okay, management should support staff, and staff should support management in the way that they can do. Insufficient time, space to process negative feelings. Okay, time is a key one. I hear that time and time again. We just don't seem to have time in this busy world. All right. And it's something that we need to think about really, really carefully and think, well, where can we make time? Do we have to have formal meetings in formal spaces? Can we create meetings in informal spaces where we can actually relax and enjoy the space? Is there times where we can do things that allow us to have that space? Or is it acknowledging the fact is that if we are being overexposed to stressful events and we have these negative feelings, what can we do about it? Is there somewhere in the workplace that we can go, a quiet space? Is there somewhere I can reach out to a colleague? Is there something, we do and we advocate this for the people that we support, but at the expense sometimes of our own health and well-being. And the reality is that, and again, you think about the airplane analogy, put the face mask on you first before you start administering to other people. So the idea is that you need to keep yourself in a place where you're able to deal with difficult situations, but also able to manage your health and well-being. Or what happens? Then that scale of negativity, all right, will just bring you right down. And it'll be a difficult place in relation to trying to get back up to where you were. Humiliating experiences. I think that's self-explanatory. Okay. And again, it's really interesting. We would think that is maybe quite an over experience, but the reality is we can be humiliated in very subtle ways. And again, it's making sure that if that is happening to you, or if that happens, how do you deal with that? Do you just swallow the pride, or do you have a mechanism or a response to potentially dealing with that humiliation? Because nobody in this world should be humiliated. And I see humiliation as different to being offended, okay? So humiliation is demeaning, okay? And what we shouldn't be doing is demeaning people. We talk about respect. Everybody should be treated with respect. So let's expel a myth here. Respect does not have to be earned. Respect is due because you are a human being. Now, the level of respect might have to be earned, but we should respectfully converse with each other and communicate with each other because we are human beings. And then first, social isolation. We've just been through a pandemic. We realize now that socialization affects our mental health and well-being. And it has, and we continue to feel that now, post-COVID. It's now fed into this economic crisis, which is then reinforcing that social isolation. So let's just remember, resilience is not a character trait. It's something that we need to work at and build on throughout our lives. Some may be stronger than others, but the reality is that we build on that. Being resilient does not make you immune to difficult situations or adversity. It means that you are human. So you'll still feel impacted emotionally, mentally, and physically in difficult situations. But again, it just goes back to how do we adapt to that? Okay, some take-home messages then. We talked about not being a character trait, something that we build through our lives through experiential learning. And again, experiential learning, the more positive, healthy experiences we can get, the better we can develop the elements we need for resilience: positivity, confidence, and motivation. Resilience is about how we bounce back from adversity, no matter how big or small. And again, physically, mentally, and emotionally, it's building our inner strength, our self-belief. And if we're living that adversity, then what we need to try to do is be present and identify, acknowledge the reality of the situation. Once we do that, we can tend to accept the reality and we can understand where we can make positive changes. So the idea is that we reflect on, right, okay, this is an impossible situation. Let's just think, what is making it impossible? And then finding out there are possible elements here that I can pick out, all right, that can help me progress a little bit further. That can just make me feel a little bit happier, make me feel a little bit stronger, make me feel a little bit supported. These things, no matter how little, feed into that positive place where you need to build that resilience up to a point where you can then start being effective again. Okay, so these are the take-home messages. So I suppose any questions or feedback, any comments. Now we do have a Menti feedback sheet, and again, just for our own audit purposes, very simple. It is anonymous, but the code is 57354072. You just go join, put the code in, and respond. It is quick and it's anonymous, and it'll be open for the rest of the night. Okay, so I don't know if there are any more questions. If not, then all I can say is please keep in touch. We always welcome correspondence from practitioners. And again, if you use any of our resources, give us feedback, all right? And the more feedback we get, the stronger our case. We can go back to the government and say, look, you know, if you fund us, we can provide more resources for frontline staff. In relation to Scotland, and again, I know this is a UK-wide project. However, because we operate in Scotland, we are funded to provide support for those who work in Scotland. So if there are any parent groups, youth groups, or staff that work with families, with young people, get in touch. If we can support you, we'll support you. We'll come out and do sessions for you anywhere in Scotland. Okay, if there's no other questions then, I wish you a conflict-free rest of the day. Thank you very much. Just going to stop my share